Welcome to BroncoIRadio.com, where every second of the day an artist is live, and home of the second annual I Inspire Showcase Concert, featuring the 39th anniversary celebration of the FSU Gospel Choir on February 28th at 6 p.m. in the Seabrook Auditorium. You are listening to iTEACH with the Tar Heel Teachers in the iTEACH Talk Show. I am Arisha Smalls, and it is Friday the 13th. And I am joined by an ensemble of teachers from all walks of education, and they have loads of experience. So we're going to start to my left with your introductions.
I'm Pamela Sands. I'm the Media Center representative.
I'm Cassandra Parsons. I'm the special ed representative.
Good evening, all. I'm Dia Collins, representing the high school population.
So today we have a show slam-packed of exciting news in education. We're going to start the show talking about a report that was put out about black girls facing extreme inequality at school. The article says that black girls around the country were suspended from school at least 6 times more often than their white counterparts during the 2011-2012 school year. And even though they only represent a small share of the public school enrollment, they have the most suspensions. And as I was reading this article, I was thinking to myself that I think I know why. I think that as young black women, we're always taught to be strong. And as we're coming up, I think that the black girls are getting strong confused with being aggressive. They think the way to show that they're strong is to be aggressive and not to allow people to talk to them any kind of way, not to just let anything slide by without speaking up for themselves. But strong and aggressiveness are 2 different things. Strength and being aggressive are 2 different things. But I think that's what's causing the suspensions. What do you guys think?
I personally just wanted more data. I mean, I think it was based out of, I feel like it was based out of New York. I can't remember as I'm kind of trying to catch my breath. But is it like that in other schools around the country? You know, what about California? What about the middle, Texas, Florida? So,
There was a time where the focus was on young black males, so this is the other side of the coin. But if you look at our families and how many single mothers and the daughters, and they're growing up faster. I have a young daughter myself, they're growing up a lot faster. And I think it's all about relationships. I keep going back to that because I really feel like that's the foundation, Arisha. And I can see in some of the classrooms where they're crying out for help. Mm-hmm. They're crying out for that attention, and whether it be negative or positive. And I think they're not hard to redirect. Of course, we have some cases, but most of the time, a good talking to or just letting them know I understand you, and that they just want to be heard. So I think it's just our job to help them to understand how to communicate their needs and wants instead of acting out.
Well, I think too, I hear people saying they go in with these expectations that certain students are going to be trouble or going to be problems, and I think that plays a lot into it. I'm tired of hearing people saying, well, if you look at the population of that school or if you look at their socioeconomic status, that's a tough school based on these factors. And so I think when you're looking for problems, you find problems. And so if you're targeting a group or you're going in with the expectations that they're going to be trouble or that they're not going to be able to do well or they're not going to be able to, be respectful or be successful in a class, then that's what you're going to get as a result.
True, but I think tough means, they're not coming with any more baggage than others. It's a different kind. And so realistically, we do have to be able to know what to do with that extra baggage. At the same time, understand that that doesn't affect their learning. They still have a brain. They're very intelligent. It's just being able to tap into the way that they learn. And, it's about educating the whole child.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you're in church and they say, well, once you hear the words, you're responsible for it. Right. So now that we know that there's a problem, so what do you guys think some interventions could be? Now that there's a problem, we're aware of it, what can we do to fix it in our schools?
Well, I think we've already started. I don't know about, let me just speak from my own personal experience. We have our counselors that have been holding some of the girls in these groups and trying to have discussions and just, giving them some validation, just trying to be positive. And also, we have to be role models for these young ladies. And, and I think we have to help them to understand about the color barriers, because people are people, but, it's based on their experiences. And so they do come in sometimes with this understanding that, there's just black and white. So when you approach them with an open mind, let them know, but I valued you and I'm here as a resource to help you if you need help. And I think that's a start, is just being able to hold these groups, let them have a voice, and then addressing, not dismissing those concerns, but addressing those concerns.
Right. I think too, expanding after school programs, because a lot of times trouble and things going on outside of school carry into school, and behaviors outside of school come into school, and having programs that teach respect and values for all children, and to keep them off the street and out of trouble, or wherever it is that problems are carrying, are being. I just think allowing opportunities for success.
Those global opportunities, bringing the outside world and expanding their mind and taking their focus off of these small things that are, I'm not going to say they're irrelevant, because in their world it matters, but just opening up other opportunities and giving them more of a focus, I think is a very that's a very good idea.
So what would you say? What would you say is the most important thing they need? Like, if you needed a starting point, what would be the first topic of discussion in one of these groups?
Well, Arisha, I'm not trying to stigmatize, the black families or the low incomes, but a lot of them are missing that one of the parents. Most of that father figure.
Yeah.
These girls are crying out for that male attention. And so, and I'm speaking from, the experience of my daughter and some of the things that are going on in our high schools. They're wanting attention, and they're wanting male attention. So that negative attention, if we can help them to, if we can turn it back into understanding to value themselves as a person, I think that's a place to start with.
Right.
And I think when we know the stem or the root of why they're getting in trouble, why are they being disciplined, what kind of things are they doing, so then we can take that into account as we're trying to implement, process A or process B to help these kids.
So this is the data you're saying is missing.
That too. More states, what's going on in other states, and then that, what are they being disciplined for?
Well, also, we know that the ratio of females to males have changed drastically. There's way more females, hence more problems in our school systems. Well, not problems, but more things that we need to take into consideration when we're forming these programs, or, considering our population or gender. We need to realize that there's more females.
Yeah. Well, I want to take a break just to welcome Mr. Marlo Artist to the show.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I apologize for my tardiness. I've had such a busy week, and I was just leaving my school. We had a Valentine's dance. And it wasn't just a Valentine's dance, it also was an incentive for the project that I'm doing for the Governor's Teacher Network. So all the students who presented this week, and first I want to thank all of you all for being judges this week. My co-host came over to my school and served as judges, so I was very grateful. So it was an incentive for them, so that's why I could not leave, because I also had to look at numbers and all that kind of stuff. So I apologize for my tardiness, but I rushed here because I wanted to join the conversation.
But you're not that late, and I'm wondering, did you drive the speed limit? You might not want to answer that on the radio.
No, I drove the speed limit.
You got here.
I just was
here quickly.
I was lucky in that I didn't encounter much traffic and too many red lights.
And Marlo, we were on the topic about the young black females being suspended more than their counterparts. I was one of the fortunate ones that was able to come to Marlowe's young, what was it?
Operation Inquiry.
Operations
For
Inc.
young inventors.
There were more females. There were more females, and so that kind of carries over to, our discussion.
Right, and also I'm thinking part of it is that teachers have to receive sensitivity training and cultural training, because some things are cultural. And I, being an African American, might not find things offensive where somebody else who maybe not be familiar with the culture may be offended. So, I mean, some of the things we have to look at why the kids, like Dia said, why are they being suspended, and look to see is there any type of bias at stake.
And we got to realize there's a culture within a culture.
Right.
Because, sometimes people assume because you're of a particular race that you can deal with children of that particular race, and that is it's just not true.
Right.
Right.
So Dia, we do need more data.
Dia will get started with that.
Yes, you need to write a letter.
Well, speaking of data, the 2012-2013 high school graduation rates are in, and for the United States, we're at a record high of 81%. So what do you all think about that? We're glad that the rate is going up, but we've talked about this on the program before. North Carolina was trying to change. I think it was the first time that you were here, Pam, that it was actually a matter of trying to encounter people who had dropped out but who had gone to a community college. They were considered non-dropouts. So I'm glad that the rate is up, but we might need to look and see
What it's based on.
What it's based on. What are the
Did
requirements?
they change the requirements to include more people,
Right.
which caused the rate to go up? Well, one of the first things I did was I went to look at. They gave a map and they had the states identified for their graduation rate, and I wanted to see what North Carolina was, and we actually fell in 81 to 85 percentile. So I was pleased with that. It's not 100, but it's pretty high.
That's good.
Well,
Because the highest was actually in Iowa, and it was at 91%, 90%, and the lowest was down the District of Columbia at 62%.
And I think a lot of it has to do with opportunities after graduation. I think students have realized that if you don't get a diploma, at least, then your opportunities are so very limited. Whereas in the past, there have been a lot of manual labor type things, and if you dropped out of high school, you could, work on farms, or you can do kind of manual labor. And there were still opportunities to be successful. Where I grew up, it was the coal mine, and they could go into the mines. Whereas now, those things aren't there for them.
It's the age of technology. So
That is a
you
good point.
can't even work. If you can't work a machine at McDonald's, you can't even work at McDonald's now.
Secretary of Education Arnie Duncan said the same thing that Pamela just shared, that high school graduation may have once been a finish line, but now it's just the beginning. So you gotta get that. Everybody knows that you're not going to get very far without your high school diploma, because that's the starting point. Then you need to go on and either find some kind of trade or continue your education.
Understood certain words. Now, as teachers, we have certain standards that we teach by. Okay, those standards over the last 5 to 8 years have been upgraded for everybody, and they employ Bloom's taxonomy. This set of verbs, they're action words. They're supposed to tell us what the kids can do when we're all finished teaching that particular thing. Well, I figured that by the time a high school student got to high school, they understood what the word explain meant, or they understood what the word solve meant, but not necessarily. I began experimenting with it and studying it and realizing that my students didn't always know what these verbs really meant. So my Governor's Teacher Network project really has involved intentionally teaching not only the academic language that they need to know to get the curriculum, but also the academic language, those verbs. What do I mean when I say compare? What do I mean when I say contrast? What do I mean when I say list? And then being able to push those students to a higher, more rigorous pace.
So what has the intentional teaching, what has it looked like? I mean, what has been your approach in order to make certain that they have a clear understanding of the academic vocabulary?
Sometimes you just have to slow down instead of teaching the thing that's in the book, so to speak,
The
the content part, and just have to take a few minutes, or sometimes a little more than a few minutes, to teach them exactly what this skill is. You may even have to employ something in the CTE classroom. I may have to employ math or social studies or science to give them a better vision of what I want them to be able to do with this skill. And once they have the opportunity to really learn, oh, this is what you mean, then bring the content into it. Sometimes the content's the thing that makes it rigorous. The whole idea is that over time, as the students begin understanding what these different verbs mean, that it will not only improve their test performance and their overall student performance and understanding in my class, it will in other classes as well. And the GTN project has been able to allow me to produce data to understand that first, there are a lot of teachers that actually assume the same things I do. You know, to start with, and then over time that actually taking the time to do this intentional teaching does or appears to really make a remarkable difference. I'll use one example in my principle of business classes, for example. 3 years ago, about 60% of the students were performing at a proficiency level. That's to say that they were scoring a 78 or higher on an end-of-course test. With really sort of picking up and working on this last year and presenting it, part of this to my staff, because you know that that's how we got kind of started with the GTN, that we'd actually started working on these things. I had seen an increase up into the 70%. By actually taking the time to intentionally teach the meaning of the Bloom's verbs. This past fall, in just that one semester, 94.7% of students were proficient.
Wow, that is amazing.
That is amazing.
So if you take the time to intentionally teach what you mean for them to do, they can do better. I saw it happen in my personal finance courses as well. And overall, the kids really are performing better. It is more rigorous for me as a teacher. It takes more time, more planning. And
the key word that she's sharing with us is intentional. I mean, all great teaching is very intentional, that you be very methodical about it so that you can get the response
exactly.
that you want.
I want them to be able to tell me that if Miss Dean says, compare these two things, that compare means show me the similarities. If Miss Dean says contrast these things, that I'm looking for the differences. And it means that for me, it means that for social studies, it means it for science, biology, math, any course. Because after having the experience of being an NC test writer also, and writing those end of course questions, that is what those questions are demanding them to do.
On that note for a second, how did you get to that point where you were able to write some test items for the state? Because there are many teachers out there who actually aspire to participate in that arena. So give us your perspective.
Well, probably I was about 7 or 8 years ago, I was first asked to participate in writing standards. And in particular for career and technical education, writing standards for what's the occupational course of study. And those were we had to take standard courses and make them operational for children with occupational needs. Some that were severely handicapped. So we would have to take a word processing course and make it applicable to them. Sometimes it might take them 3 or 4 years to complete what a student could complete in one semester. Then from there, after some success with that, was asked to help write social study standards and other career tech ed courses. I have multiple certifications, so then
easy for you to get a job.
Then as time went on with working with various committees on standards, then I was asked to come to NC State and participate in a program to look at to see if I was competent enough to write test questions. They invited about 220 teachers from across North Carolina. There were about 11 of us, I think, that were selected in the end.
The time is now 5:30 and you're listening to BroncoIRadio.com, broadcasting live from Fayetteville State University. And we're speaking to Rebecca Dean from Reed Ross Classical School, and she's just filling us in on her Governor's Teachers Network project. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Governor's Teachers Network, it was an opportunity granted to several of our teachers here in Cumberland County, Rebecca being one of them, and also Mr. Marlo Artis. But Ms. Rebecca, you can go ahead and finish telling us about test writing.
The test writing for the NC test and the end of course test is really involved. They actually asked me to use two of my talents, my social studies, along with my business education, and actually write mostly in the areas of civics and economics. And so it's very intense. It's more work than GTM.
Really?
If you can believe that or not. You have to be so very careful. No. But lucrative comes in many forms. I tell the students that as well. It was a real learning experience. It was pretty awesome. It's all done online when you actually submit the questions to the panel at NC State and DPI, and about 93% of my questions were accepted first round.
Well,
so
that's
really kind of a great thing. And but I had to stop doing a lot of writing because of GTN. And now I am a reviewer, and that's the next level. It means you knew what you were doing when you were writing, and so now I'm reviewing American History 1 and 2 and
what advice
several
would you give
other.
to teachers, since you're doing all this research regarding academic vocabulary and breaking the questions down? What advice would you give to teachers who are creating questions? I know that's the issue with some teachers. They don't really know how to create a test question that they feel is comparable to what is on the state level.
Well, I think that's one of the things that was the basis of my research, or my first formulated thinking, is that how do we ensure that we create both formative and summative assessments that are where they need to be for students, based on especially the end of course testing at the end. I've had several people in my past say, well, assessment should drive instruction. And I think that's not saying we should teach to the test, quote unquote, but how we assess is going to, or should, drive how we're teaching the classroom. The kids are going to have to know we can spin our wheels. We can spend a lot of time doing a lot of frivolous activities, but it may not ever help them in the end. I think you have to look at your standards. You have to look at, where are they supposed to be in blooms? Are they supposed to be just remembering something? Are they supposed to be at the understanding level? Are they supposed to be applying some knowledge? You have to look at the verb and the standard, and then learn how that verb is questioned. There's different circles. What's it? The depths of knowledge, the decay, all that. That's all blooms. It's all the same thing. It's just another way to use it. We as teachers have been given a lot of tools. I think that we just have to learn to reuse those words and make sure that the kids are hearing those words
in a strategic fashion.
And see if first, if informative, do they understand them at all, and then intentionally teach it, and then place our summative assessment to where we have, again, strategically placed those words to where they're seeing them again, that they know what we were talking about. So,
what have you enjoyed most about being a part of GTN?
meeting Marlo and our group. There's 11 of us
We
here.
have a great group.
We have a great group. It's really close here in our, not just Cumberland County, it's our district. There are only 11 of us. We were probably one of the smaller
Especially
districts,
size of Cumberland.
LEAs that we have, but the district being Cumberland and Robinson and Sampson and whatnot, we only had 11 of us. But I think we all became close when we met in July in Raleigh,
conference.
and then Donna Albaugh and our distinguished district leaders have really been very helpful, and they teach us a lot.
Absolutely.
They're teaching us how they force us to grow, make us do stuff we don't really think that we want to do or have time to do, but they keep pushing us to excel. They want to be proud of us too. They're really good teachers for us. So,
Absolutely.
so that's been a really interesting thing too, and to find out that when you do a survey and you find out 47 or 49 people agree with you, it's sort of validating yourself as a teacher. You might have always thought, well, I always said this, but whenever
Got
you
the
can
numbers to
sort
back it up.
of, when you kind of got the numbers to back it up, or then also whenever you start seeing other teachers, when you ask them, will you just try this? And then they come back and say, hey, that really worked. Again, it's another validation that, these things can work. And hopefully all of our hard work will get put into a professional development
Warehouse. Right.
basically, so that new teachers, old teachers, everybody alike can come and look at it and glean some ideas to improve their classrooms. Ultimately, that's the thing. We're after improving things for our kids. So.
That's right.
Ms. Dean, that was going to be a question I had real quick. I know you said you were training your students. Have you had the opportunity to train the other teachers in your building?
We started some work last year.
Okay.
And actually just really kind of like with the idea that, if you've been in education a while, you've been in all these PDs, you hear blooms, you hear rigor, you hear all these different varied decay and this and that. And what I was trying at first to say is like, this is just all tools in a toolbox, and but we tried to make an association with my first PD with it was an association between the Bloom's verbs and what we should be looking at summative, because these are the things that the state summative questions are asking or looking at. And so we spent a good bit of time with that. And as time's gone on, we've done different things with that.
Okay. That's good.
You hope someone's
Able to use it.
able to use it, yeah.
I will say this about Rebecca, that she actually, since she's at a year-round school, she actually had to go ahead and jump right in, whereas some of us had a couple of weeks after the conference that we kind of digested and come up with a feasible plan. You had to jump in almost immediately.
Yeah.
Within a week or two, right?
Actually, we had we were at conference right at
The end of June.
the end of June, and we were back in school on the 6th of July. The kids were back in on the 16th or the 17th, something like that. So yeah, only had a couple 3 weeks ago, but it's all good. It's all good. They were all still out on summer break, and I was hard at work trying to get to figure out, well, how am I going to collect all this data and do all this stuff? It's not been easy, but it's not been so hard either. I think it's because each one of us are getting to work on a project that we're a little passionate about. So I hope that the money, this is all money from the coming from the federal funds that were left with the
Race to the Top initiative.
Race to the Top initiative. I would hope that another group of teachers would have the opportunity to do this, but with funding and budgets, it's hard to know whether they will or not. I, for one, I feel blessed by it, plus very proud to represent, to have my kids at Reed Ross a part of this, and to be able to say, well, if we were the only group, that we do a good job,
Right.
so
Make it worth the state's while.
make it worth the state's while, exactly.
What's been the biggest challenge?
Oh, that time management,
Yes.
probably and in between everything, when we went to conference last year, I was just, I had 2 total knee replacements at the end of March last year. and I came back to school at the end of May, just 8 weeks after the surgery. We went on intercession, and then we were going to the conference. And so, if you remember, I was hardly off the walker when we were at conference, and getting back into school, I was barely on the getting to where I could walk on a cane. So the physical, fighting the physical and the mental and the figuring it all out, that's probably, just keep going forward. That's been the hardest thing, just keep going forward with it.
But I have to say, it did not affect your disposition at the conference. Very professional and very involved in everything that's going on. And what she also didn't share is that she's also the Teacher of the Year for Reed Ross this year. So she had that on top of her plate as well. So she's been very, very busy.
It's a blessing. Many blessings.
That's right.
So how receptive have the teachers been of, with some of the electives, because they have a curriculum that's set, sometimes there's resistance in bringing in that literacy piece. So how receptive have they been of?
Because this is not so much a literacy piece, because each set of standards in North Carolina is including Bloom's verbs. That's how the standard's set. And each end-of-course test in North Carolina, that test question is being based off whichever Bloom's verb was used. Because of that, there is more of a willingness to try to learn.
You put it that way.
And because that's the difference with mine, I think, is because it doesn't matter if you're math, if you're science, social studies, CTE, whatever course that you have that has a standard, those verbs are there. That's the first word. Evaluate, blah, blah, blah. Compare, blah, blah, blah. That's the Bloom's verb. And because whatever verb is used there will directly impact the way that end-of-course question is written. So people have been a little bit more willing to be understanding, to be helpful, and to be curious, too.
Well, Ms. Dean, I'm sorry, Marlon, but my question, I don't know if you've seen this article that deals with the Common Core and computer literacy.
Yes, I did.
So, for those of you who have not read the article, they're saying that there are children who are coming from low-income families who don't have the background or the enough experience with computers to perform adequately on the exams. And this is also for Pamela too. Is they even mentioned to improve the computer literacy, they're bringing in librarians to teach keyboarding. Now, when I was in school, keyboarding was required. It's not so much required right now. But
Shout out to Miss Hedgepeth. That was my teacher, keyboarding, and I love Miss Hedgepeth. I mean, keyboarding is essential.
It is. But what are your thoughts about the lack of keyboarding classes in school? Scrambling for computer literacy now with Common Core and testing being online?
I think one of that's the big thing that this article's talking about, is that instant grading thing, the amount of money that it saves us as a district or as a state to be able to use the online testing. But I think that the one thing is that if you're looking at starting to test at the 3rd grade level, is that too early to use online testing? We think that this is a real technology-based group of children. We see 3-year-olds in Applebee's with mom and dad playing some game, but texting and tweeting are not typing.
You're absolutely right.
And there's research by leading occupational therapists even that say the eye-hand coordination is not good enough until 5th grade. And so I think we got to decide, okay, how are we going to use this online test? When do we make this switch? Do we go back to, say, 5th grade and start requiring those keyboarding? Or do we require that during middle school? And
also one of the things that the article was saying is that kids who are from disadvantaged households are at a disadvantage with the test because they are not exposed and don't have the computer literacy that someone would who grew up with a computer in their home their entire life.
And that goes back to how convenient would it be if we could give the students a little more voice in how they tested. You know, and I know because of the amount that it costs for testing, I know that's not feasible. But if we knew the low-income kids that don't have an opportunity to work on computers much, they could take the paper and pencil test, and then those that have the experience take on the computer, how would scores be affected? You know, because you're getting those students the voice. Okay, well, this is how I want to take my test. This is how I test best. This is how I want to take my test.
But that's how we teach them, though,
Yeah.
dear. We teach them that way, and then we turn around and give them a standardized test or a computerized test.
Well, some kids are just flat scared to death of touching the wrong thing on the computer in a test situation when they know it's an end-of-course test or it's an end-of-grade type thing. They're just scared to death of messing up. So the ones that lack a little skill, maybe they need that choice.
Well, I think it's important too for a school, because at my school, if the class tests online, they have to practice testing that way all semester. We were trying to do final exam online last semester, and we had a discussion. Well, they haven't been testing online all
Right.
semester, so
Right.
can we start that spring, like this semester, so they can test throughout, you know, their classroom tests, everything be online, so they're prepared for that final exam online.
It's not 100% because we've tried to test online before and it failed.
But what
So
about
we had to back up
resources?
with paper pencil.
Miss Pamela Sands, Media Coordinator of the Year for the state of North Carolina. What about resources? Because I'm thinking about our own school and our laptop carts that we call cows, computers on wheels.
That's one concern, and you know the research in this report says that it's going to save all this money to go to online testing, but I wonder where the money is going to come from to provide all of the technology to do this online testing. We don't have enough computers in our school for all the kids, and one of the things that I've seen, you know, like 8th grade science right now is online, and something when the kids are taking an online test, they're not using their paper and pencil to work things out. When I am testing kids, that stays still, and they just are clicking a button, and I fear that they're not putting as much into it when that test is just on the computer and it's so easy to just click that button and move on.
Yeah, and also thinking about the lack of resources, it just came to me. But we do test online, but we don't have enough resources, and so it causes the testing period to be longer. So these are days that these kids are missing out of their core classes because we're trying to stay quiet so the classes down the hall can test. So when testing should only take 1 or 2 days, 3 for reading, math, and science for 8th grade, it's taken all week. And that's too long to be missing instruction.
And of course, we're fortunate in Cumberland County, Dr. Till, our superintendent, has been very proactive. And one of the Teacher of the Year projects that Marlo and I have been doing, we've really been identifying a lot of these problems, the issues with so much testing. And there is an initiative in front of the governor to actually reduce the amount of testing, because Dr. Till was telling us that in some high schools, there are 72 days a year spent in testing.
Well, yeah, I could
Out
picture
of
that
180.
because we don't think about it. Well, most of us, because we're middle school or elementary, but their semester ends in the middle, right after Christmas or right before Christmas, and so then they go full on integrate testing because when they come back, it's like they start over. They start the year over for those students who didn't have those tested classes.
Yeah, so we're doing it twice.
Right.
My daughter loves that end of course compared to at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
She does better. She said it gives her more time to remember
Mm-hmm.
and she did much better.
Interesting. Dia, what are your thoughts on the high school testing?
I mean, we do a lot of it, but I mean, ultimately, we have to have it for Standard 6. We have to have it for this. So, I mean, I'm waiting to see what's going to become of it. I try to encourage my teachers in the classroom, look, you don't have to give a test every week. Use some of the activities in your class as mini assessments.
Right.
And use those as grades so that the kids aren't tested out.
Right.
But one thing that I've noticed before we go to the break is that whenever we got the cows, I noticed that there were a lot of kids who lacked the skills, and so as you are doing the classroom activities, then now you have to teach those fundamental skills of keyboarding, in computer literacy. So I think it's important that as early as possible we teach our students those computer literacy skills so that the secondary teachers aren't having to go and try to teach that. Because that is, it's time consuming. I'm telling you, they're pecking and how to format. We're talking about this at lunch today, how to format everything. So we can go on and on about this conversation because it's something. But up next is our positive quote of the day. It's iTEACH, the Tar Heel Teachers Radio Show on BroncoiRadio.com. BroncoiRadio.com, where every second of the day an artist is live. And home of the second annual I Inspire Showcase concert featuring the 39th anniversary celebration of the FSU Gospel Choir. And this event takes place on February the 28th at 6 p.m. in the Seabrook Auditorium. So we hope to see everybody there. You're listening to iTEACH, the Tar Heel Teachers Radio Show. And we want to leave you, before we leave this broadcast, we want to leave you with a couple of positive thoughts. So our quote for today: education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And the great Nelson Mandela shared these thoughts. What are your thoughts about this quote?
Mandela was a world icon. And also, there was a university named after him. That's how much he believed in education. And he also saw that education was a powerful weapon for freedom. So that says a lot about him. That's a great quote to end this segment with, Marlo.
And I think ultimately, for those that get education, people will listen to you. If you don't get an education, how do you get people to listen to you? I mean, and I know there's people out there, doing the thing on the music, but how long will people listen to you? So I think education is very important if you want to change the world, because the only way you're going to be able to change anything is if you put it out there and people listen to you and people agree or disagree.
Knowledge is power.
There you go.
I agree with you, Dia, because if you don't know the way, how can you tell others how to get there? You can't. In order to be a leader, you have to know the way, and education is the way.
Absolutely. You got some thoughts on that, Rebecca?
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's a wonderful quote, and I think I've always felt like is that one thing about education is it gives you, if done right, it gives you many viewpoints. You don't always have to agree with every viewpoint, but it gives you those viewpoints. Being able to have those viewpoints allows you to be a better person, a better teacher. I mean, because teachers not just in a classroom, teachers in a lot of different places. It gives you the opportunity, because you understand and have these different viewpoints, to be more tolerant. And that is definitely something that the world needs more of, is tolerance.
Absolutely. We want to thank everyone for tuning into this broadcast. We want to thank our special guest, Rebecca Dean, for joining us and talking about her GTN project. And Rebecca, you're actually coming to a conference that we're going to have on the GTN. It's going to be May 2nd, so everybody will be hearing more about that. We hope that you'll join us next Friday. We're at the same place, the same time, for iTEACH, the Tar Heel Teachers Radio Show, on BroncoiRadio.com, where every second of the day an artist is live. Everybody have a great weekend.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Love somebody.